things a look over. Oh, this is interesting. That's okay. My efforts to stop this oil leak at the valve cover gasket have not worked. There's a lot of oil sprayed around here, so I might have to pull that cover off and put a gasket in. I'm not sure. I think it's actually just coming out of the hole for the Jake brake, or the lines, from the switch, the little wires, but that's gonna have to get fixed. Now I've got to clean all the traps and poison out of here. I sprinkled quite a bit in. Never caught any mice, never saw any mice. So I think it's been okay in here. I just need to clean everything up again. Alright, so we'll hook the batteries back up again. And hopefully they didn't get drained off over the winter. Well, those lights came on. The volt gauge is slowly rising. Might just give that a second. See what it comes up to. Okay, well, it's saying a little over 10 volts, but we'll see what happens. Alright, this thing isn't a fun cold start, mainly because the two strokes wander so much, but we'll see what happens. Now, usually I've never had it even try to fire on a first crank like that, so we'll see what happens second time around. Alright. Well, we might give it another crack in a second here. Alright, well, that's a good sign. Alright, so this is a little bit later on. I've gone for a little bit of a run, picked up a trailer, and now I've got a little bit of time to do some work. So I pulled the exhaust apart so I could get the valve cover off, and I'm looking at my Jakes here to figure out what's wrong with them. They're extremely weak, and I couldn't really notice a difference between having it on low and high, so I wanted to make sure my wiring was working right. So this is the low head, and the far side is the high head. So this one runs in both positions. The far one runs on the high position only. So basically what I figured out is the wiring's working. I'm not sure how to test it farther than that. All 4 of the screws light up when the Jakes are turned on. So I'm not sure what the next step is to fixing that. At this point, I wouldn't want to run this truck down any hill that required a Jake brake. It's just it's barely noticeable, and just like the sound is hardly there, but that's not really the main thing. The main thing is that it hardly slows you down, and that's a problem. So I will have to look into that. If you don't know much about these two-strokes, which I hardly know either, so they only have exhaust valves, they don't have intake valves, because as a two-stroke it intakes through the side of the sleeve. And then how this works is with each injector there, and then this is what they would call the fuel rack, and then as you step on the throttle, the rack moves, and it's not like a typical injector. All the rack does is it creates more room for the injector to store fuel before the next injection. So the more throttle you have, it just adds more fuel to each injection. It doesn't really, I'm not sure what the right way to say it is, like how a cat would pull to the pedal. These engines don't really pull to the pedal. They just simply dump as much fuel in as the rack tells them to dump in. And one thing that can happen is the racks are notorious for getting stuck, and then they will stick open and you will have an issue, such as a truck that's stuck at wide throttle going down the highway. And these things aren't exactly that easy to turn off once they have full fuel, which is why a lot of guys on this elbow here, on the intake elbow into the blower, there's a different elbow, which I wish I had, that has a big flap on it, and when you pull the lever, it slaps the flap up against the intake and chokes the engine off. But I don't have that, and I have no idea where in the world I would find one anymore. But I'm sure there's plenty out west on old trucks, on old engines, but I don't have access to one. Also, while I'm working on here, I was cleaning up the valve, or the seat for the gasket here. I found out all my oil that I have down in here, and that was splashing around everywhere. Right in here, the gasket was not sealing it off, so I have to fix that. It doesn't look like the aluminum here is damaged at all. Maybe it wasn't torqued right and it just started blowing oil out eventually. But like the valve cover is obviously vented, right? And here's the valve, the hose for the vent, and I don't see how in the world that wouldn't be enough airflow. But anyway, I will clean that all up, maybe put a little bit of a gasket maker or something on there, and hopefully that quits happening, because I'm getting a scary amount of oil blowing around, and with the turbo right above it, that's not a good thing. So now this is the driver's side, and it's a lot easier to get at. In order to pull the valve cover off, it's just two long bolts like this, with a rubber puck on the top to keep tension on there, and they simply thread in right in here. Just two bolts. It's a 12-point head, but it's easy enough to do. The far side, you have to take the exhaust all apart. But actually, I was quite concerned that the parts here would be seized, but actually the top here, it's just mounts flush. On the bottom, there's a little bit of an insert, but a little bit of tapping, and I got it loose without breaking anything. This side doesn't have the flex section of the pipe either, which makes it a little bit more difficult, but it worked fine. So I'm kind of thinking I might take this apart just to have it apart so it isn't seized. I'm guessing this side does not come apart as often as the far side, so I'm not sure what I'll run into there, but I'm pretty optimistic. Also, with the valve covers off, you can really see the blower here, which is this canister sitting sideways beneath the turbo. And it works just like a supercharger on a gas motor would work. There's just two rotors in there that blast air into the engine. And the early ones didn't even have a turbo. Now, you can't have a two-stroke without a lot of pressure, because it requires the blower to blow the exhaust out of the cylinders. So all of them had blowers, these old Detroits, and then the Silvers, and maybe a couple before the Silvers had turbos. And if a few models did, and I think in marine applications that would vary a lot. But in the trucks, the 71s pretty much just had the blower. Anyway, that's it for now. Thanks for watching.